Hello and welcome to episode 5 of Full Swing Thoughts. I am Brendan Porath. I am joined by Andy Johnson and Joseph LaMagna. Uh, Andy and I, of course. If you've listened to this by now, do I need to do this again? You know who we are, where we're from. Joseph, maybe. You probably do. If you've done the first 4, you know now that you've gotten to 5.
What if
Joseph LaMagna,
what about the
bright
Fitz
young
fanatics that just came in for this
the
single
purple,
episode?
the purple nation from Northwestern Evansville, just lining up. They just skipped
Evanston.
ahead.
Evansville.
Come on.
Whatever. It's late. We're recording this one late at night on the East Coast, so Evansville, Evanston, may be the first of many misstatements. Joseph LaMagna, friend of the Fried Egg, contributor to the Fried Egg, bright young mind in golf media. We're jumping into episode 5 of the Netflix docuseries Full Swing. This one is titled American Dreams. Sure, fine. I don't know that it connotes or foreshadows too much other than it's about the U.S. Open. The characters largely portrayed in this episode are Dustin Johnson and Matthew Fitzpatrick. The setting, I think it's only the U.S. Open, aside from their homes and going to Fitzy's home in England, in Sheffield, going to Jupiter.
I don't know what the point of going to Sheffield was.
I thought it was fine. There's a little background. It was more of a background piece of like who his parents are, what he was as a kid. You didn't like the bin of yardage books that they got out in the
I
stats?
did like that.
I mean, that's just good color if you're going from one spot to the next. But those are the large, the main characters in the main settings for episode 5, American Dreams. Initial, early, overarching thoughts about this. I think I'll go first, I guess. I thought it was really pretty. This is a very, vacuous point, but I thought this one was really pretty and shot really well. I don't know why it popped, and I said this about episode 1. This just looks different. Like the scenes on Medalist, like where he's like, they're zooming like the 360 around Fitz. I thought it just like looked really cool. I thought it was 2 really strong, authentic portrayals of both the people and players in this. I felt like I'm not sure I learned a lot new about Matt Fitzpatrick, but I felt like I got a very genuine look into who he is and how he is. I thought I learned a little bit more about how Dustin Johnson is outside of the. I think we understand he's a man of few words and just sort of equanimity at all times. I felt like I learned more about DJ and certainly why he went to LIV than I did Fitz. And that doesn't mean I didn't get much from the Fitz coverage because I thought it was great. I just found this to be 2 strong, authentic portrayals of these characters. Do you guys agree? What are some of your overarching thoughts? Joseph, I'll let you go first.
I agree with you. Matt Fitzpatrick and Dustin Johnson are 2 of the players I think of as being some of the most authentic players in golf. So that wasn't shocking to me. I guess my main takeaway, I tend to be attracted to the misfits. And I think calling Matt Fitzpatrick a misfit may not be entirely appropriate, but doesn't have the physique of Dustin Johnson or some other top players in the world, which was hammered home a million times in the episode. He just works hard.
I like going back to the USAM, small in stature.
Yeah, like they made sure to talk about that. But I do think Matt Fitzpatrick's the perfect example of somebody who just puts his head down and works his tail off. That shone through in the docuseries, I think. The one anecdote I would give is that when I had worked at a golf data company 4 or 5 years ago, it was 2018, Matt Fitzpatrick was ranked 40th in the world. And everything I heard from people I was working with who knew him closely, it's like he wants to be number 1 in the world and he will do whatever it takes to get there. And I think that was evident in the docuseries. So I thought it was a refreshing portrayal, pretty accurate to who Matt Fitzpatrick is as one of the hardest workers on the tour. Really cool to see him win the U.S. Open and realize his American dream, as it was called.
Andy, some overarching thoughts?
Yeah, I think this show has thrived. The episodes that have really thrived, like the ones that we really like, seem to, a couple of them have had this juxtaposition, and this is one that had a great one, right? You had 2 great players that are wildly, wildly different with their approach and with their stature. Everything about these two players couldn't be more opposite outside the fact that they're very good at golf and authentic, right? Those are two things that are similar about them, but everything else was different. And that's what I found really fascinating. You had DJ talking about, like, well, I guess I think I can win even when I'm not prepared. And then you had Fitzy, who's like talking about charting every single shot since he was 15. I mean, this is just banana land stuff. And I think that really worked, right? It really works when they toggle between two way different characters. And it made me think back to the Spieth and JT episode. And I think that was the problem, is they were toggling between two guys that were, there wasn't much difference. If you had put like a Spieth next to I guess a JT next to Fitz, it might have been a little different. I don't know. But when I think about, and obviously they wanted that Jordan Spieth JT friendship trait, but where the show has really worked well is when you have different characters. And this one was another example of that.
You guys, throw this out to you guys. It's my what I was thinking. Just what worked for me so well with this one, and you guys can disagree here or agree. I feel like Fitz is the first character in this show who like really changed the dynamic of his career in this season. Obviously, he's changed the dynamic in his career um over the last 2+ years. Like, we've seen him play well. We saw him shit the bed at the PGA, but like Joel Damon, like what, like he's still the mid-tier guy. Brooks, JT added a major, right? But he's still like a top 10 player. He had already been a major winner. It felt like Fitzy was like the first player in this series that like ascended a new stratosphere of resume, of career retrospective. When you look, if he didn't win a major, he's in a different category than he is now. And they were there this season where the dynamic of his entire career changed.
Scheffler, right?
That's
Scheffler.
true. I guess
I
that's
think
true.
I think with Fitz, one of the things that's
that's definitely true.
A powerful story about the Fitz is the fact that he was this phenom. Like, the USAM win at age 18 is something that like a, potential future superstar does. And I think what is like, frankly, he wasn't good enough to be a PGA Tour superstar,
Right.
despite his young success. And I think that is the fascinating aspect of this, is that it was, and I think like more so, and this is where I did feel slightly let down, and this has just been consistent with the show. So I don't know if this is just a thing. Like, they didn't really talk about like how insane the speed gains were. Like, they brushed on it, what he had done, but like from one year being so uncompetitive in major championships and big events for his entire career to what 2022 was astounding. And I think that story, it really worked as a story as is, but adding 10 seconds of color, it would take 10 to 15 seconds to explain this, would really, like, I think somebody that was watching the show that doesn't know golf, I think this is this is an episode where if you know a lot about golf, you really appreciate the episode. But if you don't know much about golf, if you're a general passerby, you don't understand that Matt Fitzpatrick was like kind of a mediocre tour player for the last 6 years.
I thought they got that enough. Maybe because I know golf. Like, that clip of him out driving DJ with Alex looking is a really emphatic moment of how far he's come when they're together at Brookline. And there's a little section on the range with the Azinger clips and all this stuff about Speed Demon, and he's adding speed. But you're right. I think the one thing for me for Fitz, like I thought he was one of the top. Like, if you were to look back at like all NBA or all PGA Tour, all pro golf team, he was one of the 5 this year, just based on consistency. And he was not that, I would say, before this year, and
never even close.
I just remember following him at Hazeltine, and he was like a fan. He was like on the Ryder Cup. I mean, you got to be good at golf to make the Ryder Cup, and it felt like he did not belong there yet. And it was interesting. This one ends with Rory kind of embracing him, and of course Rory was like an alpha then, and still is now. And he feels like someone, to Joseph's point earlier, when he was 40th in the world, just like slowly, incrementally working his way up, has completely. And I know he's the amateur phenom, but it took a while, right, for him to get to, and a lot of work. Obviously, it just feels like someone who has completely changed the dynamic of his career by his own work, his own effort, his own.
Yeah, I guess to go off Andy's point a little bit about for the hardcore fan who's very plugged into the game, this episode did a lot, but maybe not as much for somebody who's new to the game. What I know about Matt Fitzpatrick is that he works harder than pretty much anybody else. And they say that a couple times in there. I don't know that they show it as much as maybe it should have been shown.
Can I rebut something? I hate that line. He works harder than anybody else.
I hate it too, Andy.
How does anybody know who works the hardest?
I hate it too. If there's one person honestly on tour that I might say that about and feel pretty confident, it's Matt Fitzpatrick. He does the speed training stuff week in and week out. It doesn't show a ton of that. It shows him doing it a little bit, but truly that guy works. I think he does outwork pretty much everyone else on tour. I would have liked to see a little bit more of that as opposed to them just saying it. Like, I know you can see him out on the range speed training. Maybe a little session there would have been helpful. I agree with you. That's my main point. I agree with you. For the casual fan, I don't know what this episode did for them.
I think it was their. I mean, it fell into their lap because they were following him the week he won a major championship. So, like, I don't know if in terms of storytelling or enlightenment on a character, it's just entertaining. They were there, got the footage the week he won a major championship. I don't know that they were there with Scheffler for the Masters. You know, they kind of just talked around that, and he narrated it before and after. But they were like at Fitz's house, right? They were with him. It seemed like most of the week, and they got it. It seemed like they were with Fitz a lot this year. But I'd say that's the nut of this episode for a casual fan. It's like, oh, this is what it's like to be a little bit behind the scenes the week the guy finally wins the major. And of course we know that's coming, like when they're narrating it as he like goes out to the first tee and it's uncertainty. So it probably does a little less for us because we know the finish. But that was, I guess, probably the main entertainment factor of that for the casual fan. Should move on here. Or more Fitz thoughts. I guess the one point to me that hammers home like hard worker is emphatic to me was his brother not even knowing that the extent to his charting his shots. Like, wait, you chart your range? You document, you log all your shots on the range? Like, even Alex not knowing that, I guess, was sort of another emphatic moment of like, holy shit, like even if his brother doesn't know the extent of this, like there really is a lot going on here that's not seen. And so it's maybe caricatured, or there's just this blanket statement, he's the hardest worker on tour. And that's what we do. We just cover up all that real good color with that easy statement. That
I loved his tip for Alex. Hit the evens on the evens days and the odds. And I loved that Alex. You know, it also, I think, like it did a nice job with DJ and Fitz, but then also his brother showcasing like how different personalities can be when to play great golf. Like there isn't one set type of personality, right? And like Fitz is on the maniacal focus side of things, and I thought like, you know, Fitz was super, super comfortable and confident talking golf. But I did find it really interesting when Dan Rappaport was at the house. They were talking about dancing and partying. Yeah. And Fitz you could sense he like clammed up, got a little self-conscious. And he said, and he just kind of said under, some of us have to practice, you know, like, and I just no. Yeah, like you know, the thought of cutting loose was like kind of crazy to him. Well, in that same scene, Thomas Peters was great.
Do you remember? I wish I remembered exactly which article this was, but there was an article about how Matt Fitzpatrick let a bachelor party, one of his friends, use his house for their bachelor party, and Matt like made sure everyone was in bed by a certain hour or something so he could sleep.
Might
Like
have
he
been
was not
Rappaport.
participating in all of the festivities, which I think is just the way Matt Fitzpatrick is wired and is so true to who he is. So I think that kind of goes with your point, Andy, that when you're talking about dancing or some of his college experiences, as they were talking about in the episode, like that's probably not his natural state to be talking about that kind of stuff. He's a golfer.
Yeah,
Well, and what's fascinating is pairing that person with DJ.
well, totally. I mean, there's like in that scene, the kitchen scene of the PGA, I thought was one of the better scenes of the show that we've gotten. Just because it shows illuminates a lot, like Andy said. Um, but I also thought there was like a pretty like burning motivation that was like evident, that was visible on him, like to win. Like I have to win in America. I have to win a PGA Tour event. There's like a generational divide here, certainly between old world Euro Tour players. When he said one win over here equals 4 over there, and Peters is there for that. And maybe that was just, half serious, half tongue in cheek. But like you can tell it's weighing on him, and there's like he's like burning up inside about winning on the PGA Tour. And I thought they caricatured the size stuff a little bit too much. Like, yeah, we got it. We know he's like not this strapping big dude, and maybe a
The
little
thing is,
nerdy.
Rory's not a big dude.
Well, yeah, but right, but they did, but I feel like they couldn't caricature enough. Just like his entire focus is like trying to win golf tournaments, trying to be better to win golf tournaments, and like I don't think they could have hammered that enough. But I thought they went a little overboard with like, yeah, we get it. He's not a huge dude, and he is like nerdy, to use a very kind of loose term.
I think part of it is they decided which golfers they were going to film, and they filmed a bunch of content and had to figure out how to piece it together. Like they decided they were going to do Matt Fitzpatrick and Dustin Johnson. The size thing kind of revealed itself as an angle they could go with, and realistically, how much substance was there to go off of beyond that? Like I
No,
think that's kind of
right.
where I landed with this episode. Is it was a nice episode. It's kind of what the standard should probably be for one of these episodes. Like, not amazing, not bad. Just gave you some insight into one of these players, and there wasn't that much to glean from it. So
You
they
think they
maybe had to go a little overboard with like the size because there wasn't a whole lot to go off of.
You think they put their thumb on the scale and asked the USGA to pair them together at the Open, or they decided to do this episode once they were paired together?
I think it probably revealed itself when Fitz won that this was a great, because
Put them
this is
together.
like, like effectively the type of player Fitz was trying to become all these years was the type was DJ. If you think about like aspirationally, if you're a middle of the road PGA Tour player who's not very long, who would not middle of the road. He's not. I feel like I've said that twice, and I have like above average PGA Tour player who's not very long. Who would be the guy that whenever you were paired with that you looked at and thought, man, if I could just do that, it'd probably be DJ. Maybe Rory would be the other guy. I think Fitz had obviously had his like noted kerfuffle of words with Bryson, you know, so you think about like these are the types of players that Matt Fitzpatrick, I think, was clearly looking at as I need to get to there so that I can compete in major championships. And that was the big story of this year was Matt Fitzpatrick's emergence in multiple major championships. I mean,
But
like he was kind of in the mix at the Open too. I thought he had a kind of a really shitty attitude and that precluded
yeah,
him from like really being in it. But like he was in the mix at the Open. He's played well at the Masters like before. Like this is a guy now that like with these tools, like he's made himself into one of those players that fits every type of venue. And that was like the players that can do that is rarefied air, and DJ's been the one for the last 12 years that has been that, you
yeah,
know?
but what would you say the narrative of Matt Fitzpatrick was on June 1st? Which I'm glad they set this up with the disaster at the PGA. Like I really think like the
I
narrative attached to Matt Fitzpatrick was like he's never won in the Ryder Cup. He's
Mhm.
he I mean June 1st, you're like, that's how he looks on Sunday at a major on the final group. and then it changed. Like, and then by like June 20th, you're like, he might be the player of the year because we have that evidence of him contending, and now he's won it. Like, that's silly and it's fickle, and it's not necessarily all the most fair way to assess these players. And I'm speaking largely of a media tent, but it's crazy how fast that changed from say June 1st to June 20th.
Well, I remember early in the year, he was racking up top 10s.
Right.
And I think he was first in strokes gained total for the PGA Tour. And I kept looking at it like, man, Matt Fitzpatrick first. And then he had that PGA, and the Sunday collapse was obviously, but like, yeah, I think this is where I think that the stage was just a little bit, it fell short. Like, this episode could have been a lot more powerful with just a little bit. Like, I'm not saying give me 2 minutes going down. I'm saying give me 15 seconds explaining where this guy came from, and that's the thing is like that year came out of nowhere, and it was, so that's where I felt like it just fell short for the average fan. But me knowing this stuff, like I thought it was really super interesting. I didn't realize just like I had obviously read the stories. I knew about the charting every shot. I just didn't realize how intense he was, you know? And I think that was one of my big takeaways from it was just the intensity and the drive,
Yeah.
That's what I think for me, the story of Matt Fitzpatrick, if that was some people's narrative entering June 2nd of 2022, that he hasn't succeeded in Ryder Cups, etc. Like, I think for people who like look at some of the stats and like, that's not the narrative.
But he had never won on the PGA Tour. Never even won in the United States. I know that's
I hear you, but I think
the Ryder Cups, he was just getting blown out to sea.
But I think for me, the story of Matt Fitzpatrick is steady progress. Like, when I think of Matt Fitzpatrick, that is what comes to mind. It's somebody who maybe didn't have all the physical gifts that everyone else had, but he has steadily climbed his entire career.
Yeah.
And he was 40th in the world 4 or 5 years ago. Right now, he's 10th. And that guy will do anything to get to number one. And that's the part that I think people should take away.
He was my favorite player last year. I loved that guy. I thought he was maybe the best player in the world. I mean, within that capsule of whatever 3 months there, where he just kept going. I know Scheffler tailed off, then Rory came. He was my favorite player to watch. Anything about the U.S. Open? Now we're doing Fitz. We'll get to DJ here in a second. Do you feel like they did too much of the blow by blow? I feel like they felt like they were there and had the winner behind the scenes, so they really told the story of Zalatoris. Up to down, like it was the most intensive golf scenes play by play that we've gotten in this show. Did you like the US Open footage, the callbacks?
I think it was, if you're, there was 2 championships that stood out, above the rest last year. And the Open and the US Open were the 2 big championships that were, extraordinary. Those, you hope for one of those every couple of years type finish. And we got 2 of them in the same year. So I don't have any problem with it because it was, the one thing that wasn't like, they didn't show Scheffler kind of like, because it felt like Scheffler was going to win for a little while and he tailed off, right? So that was the one thing they didn't show. But that Zalatoris Fitz duel was on that back nine was really extraordinary. I really loved how they cut the audio of the fans giving them shit in. I thought that like it made me feel a little something about like, you know what? He gets shit because he wears Skechers and he's like, a little guy, like, the guy calling him, I can't remember exactly, Maddie something, like, and then he Skechers baby, Skechers
Maddie
boy,
Skechers,
Maddie Skechers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought that was powerful, I guess, but that could have been some smoke, like cloak and dagger, like production value. Like they make it seem like Matt Fitzpatrick because they zoom in on him. Like they could have picked up that audio anywhere, just walking like 500 yards away. I don't know that Fitzpatrick is hearing that. I think it was the 11th green, maybe. Do you know what I'm saying? That could have been a production trick, which I thought it was cool. It like hammered home the point for like what was being said maybe on the ground, but they also portray it as if Fitzpatrick is hearing all this while he's waiting to putt, which I just don't think was probably the case. It still is good for the show.
To your question, Brendan, like, did they overdo the shot by shot? I don't think they overdid it. But one point that I had written down, and I'd be interested in your guys' take on this. I do think that the cadence of a golf tournament and how long it is right, and like is kind of the beauty of golf. And like Thursday, Friday, like you're kind of seeing who's around, how it's going to develop. Saturday, you kind of see who hangs. Sunday, championship Sunday, you see who wins. Like that's when all the pressure is on. The show doesn't really capture that. And so I hope for newcomers to the sport, they aren't turned off a little bit by the lack of intensity on the Netflix show, because when you're watching the golf tournament, it feels far more intense than what's displayed on the Netflix show. And I do think that it
Are you talking
does
about the back
misrepresent.
9 Sunday? Like, are you saying like, or just in general from?
Yeah, I don't think when you're watching the Netflix show, you feel like you felt if you were watching that live by any means. And I do
It's
think that that's the
because
beauty of a 72 hole tournament.
it's because there isn't the time. I think that's the
Right.
thing. Is like it's
That's what it's,
similar.
yeah.
Golf is similar to baseball, right? Where it's a slow game, like regular season complaints. It's a slow game. Early round, this is slow. But then when you get down and it's close down the stretch, that pace between shots, the time between shots just weighs. It's like watching a kicker attempt a field goal and having to wait when it's, a last second field goal, right? That's the thing that golf does. I agree. And it's because I think they're trying to jam these shots in quick, tell the story, but like it's that it was the moments. I mean, I was standing on the 13th fairway when
Yeah.
when Fitz
love
made that bomb,
Yep.
and then there's everybody goes nuts, and I remember the 50 seconds, and then Zalatoris made it on top of him. It was incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's my point, is like, do I think they overdid the play by play? No, I don't think they overdid it. I also don't think it works that well either. Like, it doesn't actually capture maybe what it means to be a golf fan. And I just don't think a Netflix show can. So I hope that people who are new to the sport don't get turned off by the lack of intensity, because it is an extremely intense sport.
Thought there was some tension on 18 when he was in the bunker. Like there was like real, like if you didn't know, obviously we all know what happened. So that dulls it a little bit. I suppose if you didn't know how this all goes, you have your doubts, but or you just know nothing about golf and maybe you don't appreciate that could be a hard shot too. So all right, fair point. I thought it was good storytelling of Fitzy. I just, they're there Sunday morning, right, in his house. I don't know. He's just a normal family, right? This is guy. He's like, my dad was a corporate bank manager. My mom did this, and he probably could have just been an insurance salesman. He could have been anything, and he just has this skill and his work ethic that this is what I'm going to do, right? It's just a pretty normal. I don't want to say relatable at all, but like he didn't have like the PGA pro dad like JT, right? Or I don't know, the South Florida upbringing of Brooksy, whatever it is. He just went. It was kind of a normal upbringing, and then he went and just got it with his work.
I have to say that one big disappointment was not showing Fitz going back to his alma mater's campus and going back to Northwestern.
I didn't know that Illinois and Northwestern people fraternized so well, like them sitting at the kitchen table there, kitchen counter with Peters and Fitzy, the Battle of Illinois, the rivalry. I thought, I just didn't know that they sat down at the same table like that, broke bread. But
On the family thing, I did
yeah,
think it came across really well how invested his family was in that tournament. Like the agony that his dad had on the 3-putt on number 11, and
yeah,
then like him jumping for joy on some of the other made putts. Like
yeah,
I think that was really effective in the brother relationship. I felt something during that. So I do think it captured the normalcy of his family. I guess where I think it fell short, and not necessarily fell short, but the episode was fine. It's just that there wasn't that much to go off of. It's like a nice, genuine dude achieves his dreams in a way that was pretty non-flashy in the series. It was flashy when you're watching it live, but
yeah.
maybe less so in this episode.
All right, DJ. The
DJ.
other main character, it starts with him joining Live, basically. He's joined Live. There's really nothing about whatever he had done to that season, nothing about Riviera, when he walked it back there. It starts, he's joined Live. They have footage of him in Live London. They have footage of him at his dinner table in Florida talking about Live London, and then it's off to the US Open. That footage, him shooting basketball with his family and friends, but like it starts, the DJ story arc starts with him joining Live. There's a retrospective, which I thought was kind of cool, with like there's rap music about when he appeared on the scene. What was interesting to me was thinking back then as like a golf fan in 06, 07, and how much of a unicorn he felt like hitting the ball where he hit it. And now it's like, of course, we know he's a big hitter, but it's also like that's just how like almost all of the top players are. Like thinking back to DJ, that was like he was a true unicorn guy. Like I'm not saying there weren't guys hitting it as far as him, but very few that were actually top rated players. And now he's like
I
a
thought
big
this
hitter,
was the
but he's also
best.
just another big hitter.
This is the character that had the stage set best for him in terms of like
that
type of player they were,
Yeah. Yeah, I just thought that was a cool retrospective going back to his first win. Do you agree with that, Joseph, about like the unicorn part and how it says more about the development of the tour.
I do agree with you. And I agree with Andy that DJ came across very well. I'm a pretty adamant Dustin Johnson supporter. Like,
Okay.
I think with DJ, he's always himself. And he is going to come across well in a setting like this. And that's the benefit of being yourself all the time. He's the same when the camera's on him, when the camera isn't. Like, I have a ton of notes on DJ.
Same.
I think he's a little bit misunderstood often. And I have a ton of respect for him. I think he came through very well, like you're saying.
He came through awesome in this. I also, one point to not changing or being himself, he says, I don't feel like I'm any different than I am now. And they're talking about at the start of his career, it's like just my resume has built up and I just don't feel like I'm any different. So let's hit on the mage storyline of him going to Live. I think it's fair to say DJ's caught the least amount of shit of big name players that have gone to Live. He's been the least, I don't know, litigious, confrontational. He is quite praiseworthy of the PGA Tour in this episode. He's like, I love the PGA Tour. I've had a wonderful career. I'm very proud of it and always will be. I'm just taking a different step. I'm grateful for the PGA Tour. He said it's not up to me. I don't know what that was in reference to, like maybe just fighting or being banned. He goes, hopefully one day we can coexist nicely. And then he gives his reasons. It just came down to the offer they made me. It was playing less and making more money. It's pretty simple. And he's just got his hands up. Well, it's simple. Playing less, making more money. And he does
and then
an
he
analogy.
Went on to say everybody would do it.
But they didn't. Like there are world-class players that did not. So
yeah.
I mean, that analogy fell apart specific to golf. I think it's a pretty apt analogy for most everyone else in the world because we would take more money to work less, but it doesn't necessarily work in terms of the Live decision because there were a lot of guys that didn't do that probably for more money. Justin Thomas, Jordan, there's plenty of guys who did it, but he's very straightforward about it, and he's not I don't know, confrontational about. He's not pissy about anything. Whereas I think a lot of these guys snipe about stuff, and DJ I think probably thinks some of the consequences are bullshit, but he's not at least chirping about it constantly. Is that fair?
I think that's fair. One note I had was when they're at the dinner table talking about his decision to go to Live.
Yeah.
Somebody asks about the first Live London event, and he immediately turns to Paulina and he's like, "How was your flight?" Like Dustin does not care. He doesn't care about how the first Live event does. I don't think he's that invested in Liv's success. He got a huge check. He doesn't really care. He even said, "I have nothing left to prove." He feels like he's cemented his legacy.
Yeah.
It's hard to disagree with his perspective on any of this. Like I've never thought Dustin Johnson was slimy for going. Same with a lot of other players. Like, do you, man? I don't really care, and he doesn't either. Like, it's pretty much that simple for me.
Did you feel this was much more illustrative than the Poulter episode of, like, why a guy would go to LIV, or no? Like, we got to the heart of, I guess, why Poulter went, but this felt like it was much, I don't know, meatier, more
I think
substantive?
I think DJ tries to be less cheeky about it. Like
Yeah,
Ian almost pretends like he's got this wry grin on his face when he's like, "I don't know, maybe I'm going." Like, just
right.
say you're going. And DJ is the kind of guy that will just say that he's going. So I think that's why he comes across better, and he's far better player than Ian Poulter could ever dream of being, which
Right,
is evident.
right.
One thing I took away that I guess, like, you would assume this, and I think it's everybody always makes fun of Dustin Johnson for being dumb, you
Yep,
know,
Which is not fair.
and it's
right.
not fair. I'll tell you what, I don't know if I've ever come across from, like, in an interview being like, "Holy shit, that guy's got more confidence than anybody out there." He kinda reminds me of, like, your all-time great quarterback, where he just, like, I mean, he's like, even if I'm not prepared, I'll win," Like, I think I'm gonna win. It's like, "Oh, people can doubt me. I'm not worried about it." Like, like, that is one of the things, like, I think, like, from when you think about, like, the insights of a into a he's one of this generation's greatest players. It's him and Rory, really. And when you think about, like, him, it's just like, holy shit. Talk about supreme confidence. I don't like Rory and him, confidence wise, are I feel like, I feel like Rory right now is riding a lot of confidence, but I don't think DJ ever loses any confidence, and it kind of shows in how consistent he's been his entire career. Like, DJ's lows have not been very low. Obviously there's been some personal lows in there that have been low, but, like, not like playing wise. Like, there have been very few times where it's like, oh, what's wrong with DJ?
I think one of the moments of the past 10 years, multiple of the moments of the last 10 years that will stick with me most are of Dustin Johnson. One of them is the 2015 US Open at Chambers Bay when he misses a really short putt to go to a playoff hole. The way he shook that off, I will never forget. And that's the way Dustin Johnson is wired. He lets things roll off his back like nobody else on tour. Also, though, when he wins the Masters in 2020, the fall Masters, and he's crying on the green, it's like there's a little more depth to Dustin Johnson. He really does care. Like, the guy works his tail off. And I
Uh,
think that those
Go ahead, Joe.
it, I just think that a lot of the narratives around Dustin Johnson are unfair, painting him as dumb when I think he might have one of the best mentalities in terms of letting things roll off his back, having the memory of a goldfish, as John Rahm likes to quote from Ted Lasso. Like, Dustin Johnson has that. So I have a lot of respect for him, and I appreciate his candor
You might
in
have
this
been too
episode.
young to remember Whistling Straits.
I
Or
remember Whistling Straits.
but
Yeah,
about 16 when he's told, maybe it's a penalty, maybe it's not. The ball moved, maybe it didn't move,
exactly.
right? I mean, it's kind of how many guys just sort of go and, like, nut up, right, over the last whatever that was, 12 holes.
And that
Um,
kind of goes back to what you're saying about him accepting the consequences of his decision to go to live. Like, he's always accepted the consequences of every action that he's taken, whether it's fair or not on the golf course.
getting
You
a
know what
little
I
bit.
just thought of? Dustin Johnson's kind of had like a Greg Norman type career. Got two majors. Should have had way more. Way
Yeah,
different.
that's
Like,
always, yeah,
didn't
best player of
choke.
a decade, like they say
Yeah,
about Norman, even though Faldo won more, maybe. Yeah.
and it's just ironic that he joined Norman at Live, right?
What you, Joseph, you were talking about a little bit about, I don't know, what motivates him, and really, like, the narrative around him not being fair. I thought, like, the family stuff was pretty powerful in this, and I'm not talking about necessarily the Paulina part, but, like, the kids part. And I can't say, like, a ton here, but, like, I have a little bit of insight from someone who's known him for a long time, like, in junior golf all the way up, and still kinda knows him. And, like, um, it does sound like he's entirely motivated by his kids, and I know that's a lot of people, but in a very unique way. Um, where, like, the situation he came from was a little, like, kinda tumultuous, right? And I think it motivates who he is now, that he's not he wants to be a little different, maybe, than whatever, however he came up. And, like, he says this stuff really matter of factly, like, they're special kids, that's for sure, and it's a very basic thing, but, like, the way he says it and delivers it, is not, like he's not going out of his way. It's not a cliche, and Paulina, you know, I feel like I've never really heard Paulina talk. I'm not, I guess, seeking that out a lot. It was interesting to hear her perspective. Obviously you see pictures and she's on the green side and following, but I hadn't heard her talk a lot. I certainly had heard her talk a lot about Dustin, but she had the quote like he would never make a bad decision for his kids. This is who he chose this for. And it really does feel like he wants $100 million in his bank account, not to get like a bigger boat, but to know that his kids can get whatever boat they want, and to know like that his kids will be taken care of. And I know that's not a totally unique motivation, but I think just based on where he came from and how he came up, it's especially powerful for him, and it made this decision even easier. Like this is all driven by his kids, and I'm not trying to excuse like the for my family live talking point, but I think for Dustin, that is really the animating and driving force in this decision.
And with that, I think one of the most fascinating questions I've had is like, what is Dustin Johnson's mentality? Like, what is he motivated by? Because I always wonder if there's a lot more competitive fire there than he lets on to. And Paulina kind of lets into that a little bit.
Yeah.
And she says, like, he'll show you. Like, there's a quote
If
here that's a little
anyone,
odd that he.
here, let me read it, and then you could. If anyone thinks Dustin has lost his competitive spirit, they don't know Dustin well enough because he is ready to still show you who the fuck he is. That's
And
Paulina.
that's like him crying on the green at the Masters. Like, I do wonder if Dustin Johnson is actually deep down super motivated to play golf and he wants to go out there and show people. I honestly don't know. And that's what's fascinating to me about the next 18, 24 months, the end of his career over the next 4 or 5 years. Like, I want to see that.
Years ago, I had heard from somebody, and I said this before on pods, but I had heard because he's an Adidas athlete and Kobe was, right? Is that this is the myth is that Adidas gave like
Test.
a test of
Yeah.
that tests your competitiveness, and the lore was that DJ scored higher than Kobe.
Yeah, it was like also an aptitude test. I think it was not just competitiveness, but like also he's actually like one of the most brilliant athletes in Adidas's stable, or who's
Dustin
ever
Johnson
taken that
is.
test. Yeah,
One note on that. There was like a No Laying Up podcast like 5 years ago that Danielle Kang went on, and she talked about, do you remember when they played the US Open at Pinehurst and the men's and the women's was back to back?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I guess she and DJ have a relationship, and so she called Dustin and asked for tips on the course, and he went through hole by hole all the pin locations, everywhere you might want to miss. He knew it all down to a T. And that is not surprising about Dustin. It's not fair to paint him as an idiot. He's not an idiot. Has a great mind for a golfer.
and he
I
just
think he,
says
I
it in
think he
simple
also,
terms.
I think he
Yeah.
also has got his own little game with journalists at this point.
Well, that's
Like
developed over
he's
years.
up there, yeah.
I know.
He's up there, just like he's just playing a game up there. Like I
Yeah.
think that's like the other thing that's going on with like I there was so much more authenticity in these interviews with DJ than he ever shows in a press conference. And I think it's because DJ is looking at people that have portrayed him as an idiot for years. Like, why would you give somebody respect when they haven't given you the respect back?
Well, and
Yeah.
that's an ongoing theme, I think, in sports right now. Anyway, right? With Naomi Osaka, like, do I need
Yeah.
to answer questions for these journalists? Like, there's a lot of athletes who are sort of trying to remove themselves from that situation. And I do think, not that the questions are unfair, but Dustin has to sit up there and answer a lot of the same questions over and over again. Probably just gets tired of it. He's done it for 20 years.
And I think he just has he's very confident and has pretty simple explanations, simple
Yeah.
terms for why. He's like, he tells Paulina, yeah, I played better today than I did yesterday. It was just 5 shots worse on the second US Open, the second round, I think it was. And they talk about him going ahead to Brookline. He goes, yeah, I just got to play 4 good rounds. I know how to do it. And I think like that's really how he thinks about this thing. And that the journalists want more. They want to hear this, Spieth elucidation on whatever else. And so that leads to Andy's, kind of point about the game and sort of the backlash to that. Anything else on DJ while we're here? It was, you could tell why like he's taking the least amount of shit from his peers. Why Spieth is talking about, I miss him so much. I wish he was still out here. Why you see Rory still fraternizing with him for whatever tailor-made shoots and things like that. Like, it's a good portrayal of Dustin Johnson. No?
I think everybody loves DJ. I think that's the thing. Is like I don't think he's so himself. Like I can think of a few people that probably don't love DJ, but um, that hasn't happened for a few years.
Yeah, maybe.
But
who knows?
Yeah, but I think from the sense of I think that's the thing is like he is he's got. I think he's got one of those personalities. Like that's a guy that you want to have a beer with,
Notes.
I guess.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, the only thing I was gonna say, like this episode just didn't pop to me that much, and I think part of it is that these are both simple people. They're very transparent about what they're about, Matt Fitzpatrick and DJ. And there's not like, it's not to say that there's not a lot of depth to them. I just think we knew who they were if you're a golf fan, and the episode kind of revealed exactly who they were. So this episode, I don't think it was bad. It just didn't do a lot for me.
I liked it a lot. I thought it was a good episode. I thought it was a good. I think like the telling two stories, like the dichotomy between the two. I did think they caricatured the size difference a little bit too much, but it worked for me just because I felt like I learned, like I saw who they really were, and maybe for you, like you said, it's like not interesting enough, but or they're simple enough. But it really worked for me. I thought it was a good episode, and part of that maybe because of U.S. Open, I have like fond memories of that too. Like I thought that was one of the championships of the year, but it worked for me. Let's hit notes. I'll
One
go
note
first.
I have.
Go ahead.
One note I have is this episode illuminated just how much of a through line. I think when the show came out, everybody was like, "Oh my God, Masters footage, Augusta," but the position of the PGA has created it to be this like through line for so many of these stories. I feel like the PGA is like anchored into like every episode.
Right.
It's crazy.
It's crazy how much the PGA is shown, because you have JT, you obviously have the who else was it?
Fitzy, you have
Poulter's there. They have a lot of Poulter footage at the PGA. There's just a ton of PGA footage. I thought Fitz's setup in Jupiter was pretty Spartan. So he's going to this basic like strip mall gym, like nothing, no fancy Joey D, no fancy home gym. It's like a strip mall gym, I think. It looked like. He's got like his home looks more like a condo or townhome with like shares a driveway. He's got the basic couch with the Venetian blinds, a magnet whiteboard on his fridge like I do with my kids' schedules. And it's just like, I'm at the Memorial this week. I'm at the US Open this week. It just seemed like talking about the simple life, or he is who he like is. Jupiter, it just seemed pretty basic compared to like the Brooks and DJ setups. And I'm not saying he's that earner yet, but it was a very sort of straightforward.
He hasn't been a bad earner. That's the thing. He's had pretty good earnings in his career.
But I think he just wants to go, if I have a couch and I have a car and I have I can just go practice.
The only thing that matters to him is golf.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another note I had was, where's Zalatoris? Like maybe they just weren't with him this week. I thought he would agree to this show, right? They just,
I don't know. It's surprising.
Could be the luck of the draw. They weren't with him, or they weren't behind it, and they just didn't really tell much of that story, because obviously he had the PGA heartbreak, and then he had the putt sliding on the edge. It felt like it would have been a good story. Maybe he didn't agree. I thought he had though. Agreed to partake. You mentioned the Boston heckles. That led to me wondering, like, production tricks about like that audio matched up. Is he actually hearing that? Is he actually listening to these podcasts in his car, or are they just playing the podcast?
So. No way.
I don't think so. Right?
I had the same question. I don't think that worked that well. Yeah.
I thought it worked with the no laying up one with Joel Damon.
Yeah.
And in the previous episode, it felt like he was listening to that. Like it because I feel like he smiled, but I'm not. This one, I mean, who was that even? I didn't even know who that was.
First cut, Rick Damon, I think.
Okay.
I don't know like what's production was, because I was there at some of those press conferences, and they're cutting in answers. They'll say the question that's more dramatic, and then like they'll cut to Phil's answer, but like that wasn't how he answered that question that you just showed. Like they're out of order for storytelling. So like I wonder, is he actually even watching the US Open at home on the couch in that Boston rental home? Like you don't know where the audio is matching up with the actual scene, and that has more to do with the heckles and the podcast. Go ahead, Joseph. Any notes you had or cleanup you want?
I mean, I just love Fitzpatrick's attitude and the self-deprecation. Like when Rappaport says he's writing a story about Fitzpatrick that he's going to shit the bed tomorrow. Yeah. He's never won before on tour, and Fitzpatrick starts laughing. Like I just love the way Fitzpatrick kind of cackles at different things that are being said throughout the episode. He's just a down to earth guy. Like the fact that Rappaport knew he could say that around Fitzpatrick the day before the final round of the US Open and know that Fitzpatrick was going to think it was funny. Like I just liked that. And him letting Rappaport into his house and being like, you got here just in time to be on Netflix, like breaking that wall down and being amusing himself. Like he's just hard not to root for.
I agree. Totally.
Maybe the other note, like I loved the scene of his dad just standing there, Fitzpatrick's dad shaking his head in disbelief when Matt won in a Boston Red Sox hat, despite like not being from Boston. They're just so easy to root for the Fitzpatricks, and I'm just so happy for Matt Fitzpatrick when he won. Like he's just an awesome guy that grinds, and he got it done.
Yeah.
Who would have guessed the data boy loves the data boy? The other data boy.
That's not even like a data driven.
I'm just messing with you.
I'm with. Yes, there is some of that, right? But like Matt Fitzpatrick just works.
He's got that quote in his house when he's back in Sheffield. It's like, it just gives me very black and white, like what I need. Data. Speaking of data, it's very black and white of how I'm improving, how I'm not, and what I need to do.
Did you see his reaction when Zalatoris missed the putt? Billy Foster went nuts. And
kind of.
And Fitz was just kind of like just standing there, like, you know, just like he was like looking around. It was interesting. I found it like it kind of just felt like he expected to win. That I think that he was just like, yeah, I'm gonna win this.
I think part of that is, and this was one thing I didn't want to necessarily get super into this as a stats person, but I think when you've trained yourself that way, as Matt Fitzpatrick has, right? He's charted all of his shots. It just trains you to like, what are expectations? Like Zalatoris, is he going to make this putt? I don't know, 20% chance. And when he misses it, you have a little bit of a robotic reaction to that.
Yeah.
And I think part of what being data driven does help you with is it helps you know that you've checked all the boxes when you're going into an event. And so sure, are there insights that Matt Fitzpatrick draws from his data? Absolutely. There's value in that. But I think there's a mental edge that I've done all the preparation I can and I can accept the results. And I think, Andy, what you're saying with him just having a muted reaction to winning is actually a byproduct of being data driven. And like, if I do the right things, the rest is out of my hands, kind of like Scotty Scheffler that we talked about a few episodes ago. So his reaction doesn't shock me.
He said like it's a black, it makes things black and white early in the episode.
Right. Yeah, yep. That Sheffield line when he's back in Sheffield, it tells you what to work on and what not to.
Yeah.
Other notes: the Bon Iver song at the end of the. I mean, that Hosier, I think, is that how you pronounce him at the end of the PGA? I can't. Again, the PGA, like I don't remember the Masters. The Masters, like, has to be looking at the PGA, like, holy shit, they're in like every single episode. U.S. Open's in at least 2 or 3, right? Obviously, Damon in this one. PGA's in everyone, and like the music choices at the end that the big 2 majors that they've shown so far, PGA and US Open, is kind of amusing. Joseph, I don't think you shook your head.
Brendan, you might need to check your as a Hosier fan here, I think you might
need
to check yourself on that.
For PGA?
I don't think that was a Hosier song.
Oh, I thought I talked to somebody and confirmed that. I thought it was.
Maybe I'm.
I think it was with his dad, and he's bent over.
They probably should have gone "Take Him to Church" or whatever that song from years ago.
That's LeBron's song.
Maybe this was a new release, and I'm out of date.
I thought it was. I thought I confirmed that before talking. Anything else? How about Rappaport saying he's more serious than the older British guys?
I think that's true. I mean, the
Faldo?
older British guys. The
Is
older
Faldo
British
not
guy,
that generation he's talking about, or he's talking about Poulter,
I think he's talking.
Westy?
He's talking about Westy, who probably just drowning himself with some pints, like he did after that Wingfoot.
Rory's presence was notable on 18. That was a note. Like we saw that live, but I one thing I caught that I didn't see that week was he also went to Zalatoris and gave him like this big hug and handshake. This was from like a big tower shot. I don't know. Rory's just like he's like the prince. It's crazy. You know, he's like this father figure to all these guys, and he's also the number one player in the world. He's doing it to Zalatoris, and then of course to Fitz, who he has a bit of a Ryder Cup past with. Anything else you guys got from this episode? Good. I thought it was a good episode. Do we want to do grades or anything like that? It worked for me. I'll give it a B+. Solid. Joseph didn't sound as kind. What about you?
Yeah, I think I'd give it a B. Okay. I didn't have a problem with it. It was fine.
You thought the Damon episode was better than this one, both of you guys?
Way
I did,
better,
for sure.
Okay, interesting.
Like completely different worlds.
Yep.
Okay. Well, just like like the Damon episode achieved everything that an episode should strive for.
I think a non-golf fan is drawn into the game when they watch the Damon episode. I don't know that they watch the Fitzpatrick DJ episode and think to themselves like, you know what, I want to start following that guy's career.
Yeah. Maybe it was better for people who know their stories a little bit more and got more revelations into their insight, who they are. All right, that does it. Episode 5, Full Swing Thoughts. We'll be back. Episode 6. Thank you all for listening.